Test.
Here we go.
Better?
The views presented in this program are not meant to express the specific views of the Aletheia Bible Fellowship. You are listening to the Vigilance Radio Network.
And we're officially live. Welcome back to Culture and Sanity, podcast here at Aletheia Bible Fellowship. So welcome back to episode number 4 of season 2. Some things to talk about, some updates on some things we've already talked about that deserve some attention, considering it's the current what you call hot topic in culture. Some things that are on our docket this week. There's an article that I thought was interesting regarding the Captain Marvel movie, written by a female. That there were some interesting points. I think it'd be fun to talk about. There was something in the news about Cardi B and talking about her past, and there's a question of there's certainly a question of morality there, but a question of maybe a double standard because she's a woman. So that's good. It's an all-men podcast so far talking about women things. So we're already ostracizing half of our audience. There's a Michael Jackson update. That's sort of what I was alluding to at the beginning. Just what's the current and latest news update on that. So if you're tired of the story, sorry, but that's what we do here. We talk about what's in the news and what's hot. So,
I could self-identify as a woman if you'd want me to.
You could, and you'd be completely in line with what it is that you're allowed to do if you're non-believer. Yeah. Also, there's an update on the Jussie Smollett. Yeah, I don't know how you pronounce it. Smollett, I think. Case. And so the Michael Jackson thing and the Jussie Smollett thing, they sort of bleed into each other in terms of maybe the angle we're taking today. And then if we have time, maybe we address the Kanye West Sunday service, as he's calling it. So some red flags with that guy, whether they're not. So there was a article written by a woman, just sort of a review, a different kind of review on the Captain Marvel movie. So for those that don't know, Captain Marvel, latest Marvel movie, strong superhero, gonna save the day in the next Avengers chapter. But it was sort of being advertised pretty blatantly as sort of like this strong feminist rallying call, I guess. I don't know, but there was everything that was being written about it leading up to it and after it. It's being touted as like the feminists' ideal movie. Finally, here's a character that's seemingly flawless. Maybe that's a different issue, but yeah. So all that. So it was generating a lot of buzz. Is my point. This person reviewed this movie, and she is like a self-proclaimed I don't know, feminist, I guess. She's been wanting to see a movie like this with a strong female character, but she writes it from a sort of an honest viewpoint, because I saw it and I think you saw it and you probably did not see it, I'm guessing.
I did not. I think I saw a trailer for it. Yeah.
Nice. And I personally thought it was kind of a boring movie. I don't know what your off the cuff review is of it, Josh.
Yes.
Yeah, just sort of.
It was fine. It was fun.
Non-compelling. It was fun, but non-compelling.
I mostly got a kick out of seeing the technology they the technology flawlessly used to reduce the age of Sam Jackson and Clark Gregg,
which they apparently like to do over there at the MCU. They've done it to several of their characters now. Oh yeah, Clark Gregg too. But anyways, so I'm just going to read a couple things from this article, and then maybe we'll pose the question. But so she's talking about the movie and breaking it down, and ultimately decides that though she wanted it to be like the movie that she can put on a pedestal, that all females can put on a pedestal, she had a hard time doing so. She says in reviewing the movie, that's when I realized that I've been doing the same thing for the last few years, not allowing myself to fully critique female-led films the same way I do their male-starring counterparts, trying so hard to force myself to like some of these movies more than I actually do. I think she was talking about being in the taxi after the movie, and she sort of was giving a very not passionate review to her taxi driver, and realizing that about herself. But because she was lying about it. She's like, oh yeah, it was great, but she was like lying. And then she said, ultimately I'm scared to speak negatively about strong women because I feel like my feedback will hurt the chances of there being more female cinematic heroes in the future. It seems anti-feminist to complain about Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman not looking quite athletic enough to be an Amazon warrior trained by an ambiguously accented ant. After all, Diana's strength comes from powers, not physical muscles. Plus, commenting on women's appearance sounds awfully sexist. I wouldn't dare. You see, I've been selectively cheering movies on, while also secretly wishing that they had everything: humor, brains, courage, charisma, strength, confidence, and heart, so that they are worthy of being the star of a figurative poster on my bedroom wall. She ultimately, lands on the side of the movie was just not compelling, and the character is, seemingly flawed. What's it called when a character has no flaws? It's called something in movies. Do you know, Josh?
Are you talking about like Sue? A Mary Sue?
Mary Sue, yeah.
Yeah.
I think she uses that. That
it's not just that a character has no flaws. I'll look up the definition for you.
Yeah, so she had a problem with that, the writing and all this stuff. But so she was in this weird dissonance. Wow, this chair is terrible. She was in this weird dissonance of wanting to like the movie, but recognizing that it's not that great. And then she's scared of saying these things honestly in fear of hurting the cause, if you will. You tracking? So then the question is there, I don't know if this is posed right, but is there a disparity in feminism and valid criticism? Or is it possible to have feminist ideals with valid criticism, or is there a real danger there, as she's suggesting? She's scared in her review, even though it's her honest review, because it might sort of damn the feminist movement. You have a half smirk on your face.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the feminist movement is they're having issues with identity, so they're touting themselves as having an identity, but not understanding what their identity is. So most feminists want to project that they are it, that women are it, and that men are nothing, and that women are superior to men. But then they try to tout that by comparing themselves to men. Well, okay, you're obviously confused. The reality of it is that if you want to take joy in who you are as a woman, then understand your womanness and be content with that. But when you start comparing yourself to men and how men perform and what they do, and are you a good representative of that, and et cetera, all it says to me is that it's lame and that you really don't understand the issues.
Maybe a better question, as we have a couch full of men, is can we criticize these, these, what's the word I'm looking for? Like blatantly feminist style movies, or any media for that matter. Can we as men criticize them without being labeled as sexist?
Sure.
Or anti-feminist?
Sure.
We can.
Yeah.
You think we can safely?
Yeah. Well, unless you're a wuss and afraid of somebody, trying to hold a label on you. I'm not afraid.
Presented in this program are not meant to express the specific views of the Lafayette Bible Fellowship.
I'm about truth, and truth is devoid of the fear.
Okay, let me rephrase the question.
Of being labeled.
Do you think we can?
You think the third time will be a charm?
No, I was going to say, do you think that we as men can criticize and comment and critique these arts, whatever they may be, without being labeled as sexist or anti-feminist? Do you think that the culture allows us to do that?
Oh, that's a different story altogether.
Because of course we can, right? And,
yes, we can. And I think that the one has to take into consideration that currently the culture is in flux. And since the culture is in flux...
Because her view is she's a woman and she feels like she can't do that.
Well, that's because she's insecure and not sure of herself. And she's more importantly thinks that, her voice is so necessary to the proclamation of her womanness that she's not sure she can be true to her voice.
Well, I mean, I don't remember the exact her exact job, but like if she's a film critic, then her words do carry weight on some level.
If she's a film,
or if she's a film critic for the USA Today, a national,
Okay, but you can't be... Okay, so you have to separate out... There has to be a compartmentalization here. If she wants to be a feminist, then... and tout the ideals of feminism, then that's one thing. If she wants to be a film critic, that's another. And it's entirely possible an honest film critic will critique what it is that they're viewing...
objectively.
Regardless...
Yeah.
So I want to push back a little bit. So, two things. One, I don't know that view of feminism that you're talking about, I don't know that view is actually... I don't know that feminism is a monolithic term.
It's morphed over the years, but at its heart, it's pretty much there.
Okay, so I don't know that feminism is a monolithic term. I don't know that description of feminism is... like really represents where people are at in general. I think that there is a subsect that leads a very specific, like the outliers of feminism. But I think the majority of people who consider themselves feminists aren't actually thinking in those terms. I think they're just thinking about equality for women. Not saying that they have a real good definition of what equality is or have really thought it through as like a political position.
I'm speaking clearly from a social science position.
Okay. But then you would recognize that it's not monolithic, right?
Sure.
There's no organization, feminism, and then you join it and get a card.
Actually, there is now, for example.
What do you mean?
National Organization of Women.
Right, but that is
a feminist.
That's a feminist group, but that's not the only feminist group.
It's not the only one, but they're pretty big and represent quite a bit.
Sure. So, but that's what I mean. It's not monolithic.
Right, but feminism has been around for years and years and years, and I've seen it grow into all kinds of different ways.
So, but then in talking about this lady, like we're assuming that she is more along the now side of feminism, right?
Okay, I'll give some leeway there. Sure.
Okay. And then the second thing I wanted to ask about, well, actually, let me quickly break to say what a Mary Sue is. So a Mary Sue, originally a concept in fan fiction, is a type of female character who's depicted as unrealistically lacking in flaws or weaknesses. And so people call them Mary Sues. It actually doesn't just apply to females. The best example in sci-fi is Wesley Crusher on Star Trek: The Next Generation. He's considered a Mary Sue, like the boy genius, and it's oftentimes like the writer of it is like, this is the person that exemplifies them, almost as if they're like an avatar for the writer. So anyway, that's what a Mary Sue is. Now back to the discussion. What was the?
I don't know. You were pushing back.
Pushing back
you're
on
pushing
the general like consensus of feminism, and then you were
yeah.
her position.
What I was going to push back on is the concept of a critic without bias. I think that there's a difference between an observer and then a critic. Like, an observer is somebody who just writes down history, and that's not what a critic does. A critic uses their bias, specific. Like, that's what they do. And they come from different schools of thought and so on and so forth. So she's not a movie reviewer in the sense... Well, no, she's not a movie historian in the sense of just writing down what happened. She's a movie critic, so she's going to use her bias. And if her bias is feminism, then I think that it's actually... really telling that she worries that her position is in conflict with her ability to be intellectually honest in her field. That actually says something about the strength of feminism, or the not strength.
Yeah, because her conflict is that it'll crumble if there are voices like hers that are honest in there.
Right.
Yeah.
That's my pushback. You're welcome to push back.
Well, now we're dealing in a realm of opinions. So what you just said doesn't contradict anything that I said. My belief is that the critic is not a historian. You're correct. A historian simply delineates facts about a particular deal. A critic is somebody who's going to look at the film and critique it, yes, coming from a particular angle. So if she's stating on the upfront that her critique is how it is that this film measures up to her concept of what feminism in culture is to represent, then that's okay. But if that's what she's really critiquing, and she states that up front in her critique, then she can still be honest with that. If, however, she's not being honest in how she approaches her critique, then she should feel guilty and ashamed.
Well, I think that's what she's doing. I think she's saying that position is something she has to rethink because it's not allowing her to be an honest critic.
She just needs...
To me, it reminds...
She needs to man up.
To me, it's...
Well, I'm confused. I'm confused on what you're saying. Are you saying that she should use her feministic viewpoint?
Sure, if that's truly where she's coming from and she's critiquing it from that standpoint, then be honest in the assertion of the critique and say, I'm looking at this and critiquing it from this standpoint.
Right, but she's saying that she feels like her position as a feminist doesn't allow her to be intellectually honest. And then she's saying that's a problem.
That's not a problem. That's bovine extremism.
Okay, I'm confused because it sounds like your position is that feminism is a bad thing. She's essentially saying that feminism is not allowing her to be intellectually honest and therefore is a weak position to hold. And then you're saying she should go ahead and hold that weak position. So which is it? That feminism is a bad thing or that she should go ahead and hold her weak position?
My opinion of feminism is that it's lacking in several areas.
And that's what she's saying.
As a social science.
And that's what she's saying.
However, if you're going to name it, then claim it and be bold in your assertion.
What if what you're naming and claiming is wrong? What if it is weak and you come to the idea that it's weak? Should you keep going with it or should you reject it?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It seems like she's at this sort of cognitive dissonance. Like she wants one thing, but she understands it as another.
And she's like doing that meltdown live.
Yeah, and to me it reeks of like the whole equality of outcome ideology. Like it has to be on par because it's a woman movie. It has to be on par with its counterparts, or else there's something wrong with society.
Well, and that's what I was saying. Like what we're seeing is the outworking of intersectionality, right?
Yeah.
Not to get into that discussion, but let's go ahead and see how it connects.
Well, no, you're definitely correct that what we're seeing in particular is we have an old school style of feminism coming out of the 50s into the 60s and what have you. Then we have the intersection of a culture that is the millennials and the X-gens and all of those that are now stepping into and trying to redefine what was before them. And her conflict is that she's in the middle of this redefinition of what was to what they want to be is, and it's normal inside of the the changes that take place in subcultures within a culture, and it can also be traumatic in trying to figure out what is the position that you actually want to take.
See, I don't view that as where it intersects.
I'm just saying that it's, if you're going to take a position, own it.
Yeah, but if the position is weak, then own the fact that your position's weak.
Yeah, I agree with that too. But
for me,
that's not my struggle.
Okay, but we're talking about her struggle.
Right.
The weakness that I see here is that her position, she's coming up on intersectionality, specifically where the minority status intersects. And so basically the fact that she is a woman and has a view that she is oppressed. But when she's critiquing a film that is showing how a woman interacts in an oppressive world, and that film isn't a quote-unquote oppressive world, and that film doesn't accurately show the oppressive world that woman has to operate in, yet it's supposed to bolster her position that a woman can operate in an oppressive world and go further than it, then it's hard for her to see that woman as an accurate figure of what women in an oppressive world should be looking up to, because that character is too perfect. She's a Mary Sue.
Okay, we're back. Nothing that you have said nor nothing that I have said changes. The reality of it is that she has an issue, and she has to determine where she's going to fall as she represents herself on this particular issue. I'm saying simply that as a critic, if she's going to critique this film within a particular context, then critique it and own it like she should. If she has a dilemma of finding that her critique doesn't measure up to her philosophical leanings, then that's something she needs to address personally and maybe modify where she's coming from. I don't see it as being a problem, except that she has problems with her own intellectual honesty.
So you think it's better that she not be... I don't think she does have issues with her own intellectual honesty. Do you like in the fact that she says it
vulnerable about it?
That she's vulnerable about it.
Oh, please. Well, you know my feelings about vulnerability.
Okay, so is this a generational thing where you don't think that struggle should be live?
Yeah. Yeah, yes, I think that it's not something that... There is a personal element to it where she's going to have to be retrospect and look at her own writings and how she's translating those writings into putting them out to an audience, and whether she's being honest with herself and her audience or not.
So what would you like to see in the future from her? Because really what we were talking about is about Captain Marvel and the idea of a female archetype being a Mary Sue and how that conflicts with the feminist ideal. But you sort of switched it into talking about how a person deals with their own vulnerability.
Yes.
So
personal struggles.
What would you like to see from her, as a person? Like, what would you like to see from her as she critiques things in the future, knowing that she's put out there that she has vulnerability issues? Or not vulnerability issues, that she has issues with her feminist position
Well, as a movie critic, if I'm reading a movie critic, I want somebody to review the movie for its merits. What is the movie trying to say as far as a cultural piece? What is the were the actors and actresses convincing in their depiction of what they're trying to say? All of those things are issues which you can critique without approaching it from a philosophical bias. If, however, she's writing specifically to address something that she feels is part of a philosophical bias. For example, this film particularly trying to address problems and or things in culture that need to be changed or or looked at greater, then she needs to be sure that she understands philosophically where she's coming from and address that in her critique. That's why I say I don't think she's being intellectually honest.
Yeah, I don't get that.
I don't know. I just don't know if I agree, because
that's fine.
I think she. So, like I said in the beginning, the movie was generating a lot of buzz as being a movie with an agenda.
Right.
So by what you're saying, because it's a movie with an agenda, it needs to be critiqued by that standard.
It's the feminist agenda.
Right.
And so she was trying.
She was trying to.
Does it meet?
And so she was trying to, but that she came to a realization that it doesn't. It's not realistic.
Right.
Then she, as part of her critique, she says, "This is what my conclusion is." And based upon this, that, and the other thing, this movie is weak and fails to communicate what it was intended for.
But then she's adding to it the element of understanding that there isn't really the possibility for the movie to be anything but weak.
That's not her issue. She's a critic. No. That's the issue of the writers.
That is her issue. That's exactly what critics do.
That's the issue of the writers, the producers, and the directors. Her responsibility as a critic is to look at it and critique to see whether or not they accomplished their goal.
Well, there's no such thing as there's no such thing as a universal standard for critiquing things. Even if you're going to say that you're just going to look at cinematography, for instance, then you get into schools of thought of what cinematography should be. At that point, you're a philosopher. You're not a historian. And this is why, like I said earlier,
part of what
critics are not historians.
No, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. The person who critiques, though, has to lay a foundation for what it is they're critiquing and why the critique is being done.
Which she did.
And, okay, so if I'm watching a film and I know that the purpose of the director, the writers, the director, and the producers was to deal with a particular social issue, then I'm going to critique aspects of the film as to whether they understood the issue and whether they were able to effectively use this medium as effectively to bring about what it is that they're seeking to do. And she's perfectly within her right to establish a foundation and then say either they met that standard or they didn't. Either it was strong in what it was purporting to do, or it was weak.
Which she did, but then she's not willing to.
Okay.
But she's not willing to address that standard as being a valid standard or not. She's not able to do that.
What you do is you write. In part of laying your foundation is to develop within the introduction of how it is that you're presenting your critique, what it is you want to address. So it just sounds to me like she doesn't understand how to, forgive me, but it sounds to me like she doesn't understand how to correctly format and write her critique. I read papers all the time from students that have this exact problem, that they don't know how to take and develop a paper in such a way that they can accomplish what they're purporting. I don't see she's got an issue. She just needs to personally own what it is she's trying to do.
Okay.
I approach this as an academic. I approach it as a social scientist. I approach it as a professor.
A movie critic is not a historian.
Well, I'm not saying she has to be a historian.
Well, that's what you're talking about. You're talking about writing things from an academic perspective.
No.
Movie critics write blogs, and they have a completely different infrastructure.
Movie critics are telling a story. And they're still conveying an idea. And their medium of conveying an idea is writing. And the elements of correct writing still convey a story to bring your reader along as to where you want to go.
Yeah, but writing isn't monolithic. Again, writing isn't a monolithic thing. It's an art form. There's all sorts of different types of writing.
Mm-hmm. Well, in this case,
and movie critics have a very particular style.
Okay, good for them.
Movie critics are opinion pieces.
If the issue, Josh, is that she's uncomfortable with what it is that she's trying to do, then she needs to either own it or not.
Okay.
Let's move on. Did you post it, the article?
No.
I can share it with you so you have just quick access
All right.
to it. So that
you guys decide for yourself. We'll post the article.
Yeah, we'll post the article. Let's move on to the bigger topics because they'll probably take the rest of the time. But so Michael Jackson update. I posted the article to our thread, Josh.
Okay.
Michael Jackson update. So fill in the blanks because I'm sure we're tracking it a little bit better than me. But the director of Leaving Neverland,
Dan Reed.
Yeah, Dan Reed, which is the documentary that's out now on HBO. I think, yeah, HBO. Has come out and admitted to some discrepancies or time disparities in the allegations by one of the guys, Safechuck, I think was his last name. Whoops. So some journalist or something, some guy that was, I think, part of the trial. Was he part of the trial?
He's a biographer.
Okay.
And so he studied Michael Jackson.
Okay. So he, was looking into things as it should have been done the entire time, which also I would remind the listeners was done during the trial. Went back and looked into, for example, it had to do with the train station, right? A train station. Right. So in his allegation and detail of alleged abuse on Michael Jackson, Safechuck talked about, in particular, a location where it took place several times, and this train station. Well, the guy, I don't know the guy's name that brought this information to light. He revealed that the time frame from when the train station was being built to being finished or something of that nature doesn't jive with the allegation, basically, the long and short of it. And so the director came out and basically says, whoops, yeah, I missed that.
And his whole narrative was derailed.
Yeah, well, it definitely
terrible.
Yeah, for those that missed the pun, it definitely throws into question what was already there, in our opinion, I think, which is just the validity, the
lack of evidence,
the
one-sided narrative.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's that. So, what's the question? What do we trust?
Well, it's just a continuing, update in that saga of what happens. Where are we? Where are we in terms of trusting anything? And it's the same thing. It's kind of across the board with the whole fake news. I don't want to get Pastor Monty riled up anymore, but
Mueller reports.
But yeah, we look at we look at that. We've been being told in the news for the last 2 years that there was collusion with Russia. And then they do the report, and it doesn't show any collusion.
Oh, then it must have been.
And it's the same. It's the same thing with Michael Jackson. You know, we have previous reports, and old information is being brought up, and fake things are being brought up about Michael Jackson. That's being released as if it's new and is being spun a certain way, but you know, it's not new evidence. There isn't new anything, and that's a problem. Like, it's a problem. And the thing that gets me is that Dan Reed, his response to it is basically an, oh, well, the narrative is still intact.
Oh, really? I missed that part. So he admits that there's a discrepancy, but also says that doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
Huh?
Right. No, because he's coming from a world of subjective reality.
Here's what he says.
Yeah.
Okay. There seems to be no doubt about the station date. The date they have wrong is the end of the abuse. So basically, in the narrative, the abuse stopped when he was 14, which was before the train station was made. And then he's saying, the station date, that's true. That just means the abuse took place later.
Yeah, and what's funny, it's funny, although it's really not funny. But it's funny because it's so absurd. And you mentioned this before we went live, Josh, is court trials are built on like the details of a testimony.
Right.
And so now we're at a point of, you know, the details are not remembered the right way or whatever, but they're wanting their testimony to remain intact. And it's like, that's not how it works.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
you don't get to claim that, oh yeah, the details are cloudy, but still, yeah, here's this, you know.
Yeah, well, like, in a court of law, like remembering details about where a house was in particular, or how a room was set up, or those things are very, very important to getting a conviction. Mm-hmm. And you know, those things aren't there. Then again, having a trial by jury, being able to face your accusers, having actual evidence, having you know, all of those things are a part of making somebody guilty, and none of those things are present here. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of evidence. Like, let me just give you like a little tiny piece of evidence that has been blown out of the water. I've seen a lot about Michael Jackson's porn collection lately, and they're saying Michael Jackson had all of these books about pornography, right? Well, the truth is that he did have a porn collection. However, his porn collection is all adult porn that is heterosexual, not homosexual, and the material that he did have that had children depicted in it was not sexual material. It was material that was taken out of his library that was just books on art. Like, I've seen the pictures. I've seen the pictures of the books, and I've seen the listings of the books. They're books on art that you can buy anywhere. Like, you can buy them on Amazon. Then the other thing is that you have to understand that that's a part of his personal library, which was one of the largest personal libraries, like personal collections of libraries, because he was an avid reader. And so he had an art section. He had a music section. He had a classical literature section. Well, these things were scanned over, looking for material that he could possibly use. And so they found in his library books of art that had pictures of little kids in them, not in adult erotic positions or anything like that. And they took those and they said, here's a book that here's 100 books out of Michael Jackson's collection that can be used this way. Now, when the police took them into custody, and you look at the police records because they're available online, it says that these books are not they're not adult material.
Right.
But they're used that way. But that's what the prosecution was trying to prove, was that he was using them that way. And that's an example. That's an example of like how evidence is taken.
Right.
Misuse. Yeah. Another thing about the whole train thing was, in the previous testimony by the parent of this guy, I want to say, I think I read this.
Yeah.
She admitted that, like, they were on a family vacation or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Is that correct?
Right. Right.
And so just like that, and this was back when the trial, like the actual trial was happening. Like, this was her testimony that they were on a vacation in the Grand Canyon or something of that nature.
Yes, that's correct.
And so and again, this is a guy that testified in his defense back then, and so it's like, yeah, these details don't jive, and yeah.
One of the articles that I was reading about this particular story is from a British newspaper writer, a British journalist, and he was just talking about how America isn't covering it. It's all over Britain. Like, it's all up in Britain. They're talking about this particular uncovery and how it affects things, but they're not talking about it in America.
Of course not.
And he was giving a bunch of different reasons why that could be, not just because Michael Jackson was American, but he was giving a lot of reasons why that could be. But one of the reasons that he gave that I thought was interesting was the possibility that Britain is actually faster in its news, and so for them the story's over. For us, it's not, and so for them the story's over. So now it's just like, what's the next thing they can consume? It was interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
And look, if Michael Jackson's guilty, then he's guilty, but show evidence.
Yeah, it's the same beat that we were talking about last episode too. Like, there's the trial, the whole way it's been done is not compelling, and what's been done is more compelling than what's being currently done, and there's no compelling evidence, and it's this unapologetic one way story is not what we should be purporting as far as what we want in terms of fair trial and innocent till proven, and et cetera, et cetera. The same drum we've been beating.
And the ramifications are incredibly large when you think about all of the implications of this, even for our children. Like Michael Jackson and he's not R. Kelly. No offense to R. Kelly, but Michael Jackson's influence on the world was a huge influence. And right now there's this push to sort of censure his existence. You have radio stations like removing his music and so on and so forth. I've been hoping that actually will bring his record sales down, and then they'll be cheaper to buy. But they haven't. They've actually stayed steady. But in any case, that's a huge problem. So I think about that for my children, and I think, like, how are they going to understand the world when people are guilty just because
someone said so?
Somebody said so.
Mm-hmm. But that is again, talking about cultural shift, that is the battle that is going on right now in American culture in particular. But that is the battle which is going on.
Yeah, I was asking my brother when this came out, a week ago or a week and a half, whatever it was. I was like, "Hey, have you heard the latest in the blah blah blah?" And he's like, "Dude, I'm so over it. I don't care. It doesn't affect me."
He's British. He's British, right?
No, he's not British. But I was like, well, I understand. Like, while I understand it, like, I'm over it too. I don't want to keep talking about this. I think we're all sort of tired of it, especially those of us that don't.
I'm just sad about it.
Yeah, don't agree with how it's going down. But because I think he said, like, it doesn't really affect me, and I challenged him on that.
Well, it doesn't affect him now, directly. but it very much could in the future affect him, when anybody can make any accusation they want without any backing, and/or we move into the minority report scheme of things in our society, where you convict somebody based upon something that hasn't happened that maybe will happen in the future.
You meant Minority Report in the precognitive pop culture sense.
Yes.
I knew we had him on here for a reason. Yeah. I think
and we're headed that direction, which is scary. So the person who says, "Well, that really doesn't, that doesn't affect me."
Well, it happened with the Liam Neeson thing. Here's something that I didn't do, but maybe there was a reality in which I would have done it, or something like that.
Right, and exactly.
And
that's even conjecture.
Within the last year and a half or so, there have been major shakeups at all of the networks. Coming exactly from this type of thing, that people make wild assertions and then you have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to say no, that's not reality.
I think with the only one that really stands out to me that was bad was the Roseanne Barr one. The rest of them, there was actually evidence.
Well, Roseanne Barr
was an interpretation.
No, on Fox there were several anchors that got sacked. In fact, one anchor's child committed suicide because they couldn't take the pressure.
That's really sad.
That was being exerted. Yeah, and you know, Bill O'Reilly, he had a show for 20 years, which was very, very on top of things, and he just said, "I'm not putting up with this." They bought him out for something like, I don't know, $23 million or something like that. But when you talk to him about it, he said, "You know what? I'm not going to fight this.
Yeah,
this is ridiculous. I'm not going to fight this." But that's what we see happening in what's been going on with President Trump and the last 2 years and all that. They're looking for a crime and throwing a narrative out there, hoping that narrative will stick, even though it doesn't meet reality.
Well, and there's the difficulty, right? Is Dan Reed's response? Mm-hmm. That's the difficulty.
Yes.
Is you're right, it didn't stick, so now we'll just conveniently change the narrative, and you're still guilty.
Yeah, exactly, and that is what's happening, by the way, with President Trump. Is now they're trying to change the narrative. Because they will not let go of their narrative, even though the facts just slap them across the face.
What I would like is, I'd like for someone to say sorry. That's like.
Well, that's the other thing. They don't say sorry.
I mean in a meaningful way, not just say it. But that's what I'd like. I get this person really is guilty. The narrative does change, right? I get that, and I get some of the comments that have come with the narrative change in the Michael Jackson situation, where they're saying, okay, but victims have a hard time remembering things, right? I understand that. I have experienced that as a pastor. That being said, where is the we were wrong? Even just to say like you can say this is still a truth. This evidence doesn't lead up, like this evidence shouldn't have been used that way. This was bad journalism. This is still a truth, and we're going to find new evidence toward that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There needs to be something. There needs to be an accountability for it.
Just sweep it under the rug as if it didn't happen.
Right.
There's no journalistic honesty. There's limited journalistic honesty any longer.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. There needs to be that sort of honesty, and I'm not really sure what to do with it. I mean, we're basically, and we've talked about this before, but approaching a very McCarthyistic era. So
very dangerous. Culturally, very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we're at 51 minutes right now.
Wow.
I know.
Are we going to play the game? Not today?
Not today. We only have 10 minutes left. Have you guys been tracking the Jussie Smollett thing?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So,
I'm a little bit personally confused on where that's at because of different accusations being thrown around and what happened, how something played out. But it seems like the waters are really muddy there, too, in terms of what's true, what's not true, what happened.
Last I heard, he was being sued by Chicago.
Yeah, the city of Chicago, and
Chicago
being
offered
told to pay for the whole investigation.
Yeah, Chicago basically said, "Look, first of all, he put out the narrative. Talk about false narratives. Mm-hmm. He put out the narrative. Smollett did, since they didn't really push the issue that he wasn't guilty." And the truth of the matter is that the prosecutor allowed the charges not to go forward simply because, well, she's under investigation now. Fox is under the woman is under.
She potentially got paid out or something like that.
Well, she was
That's what I heard.
She was influenced by the press secretary of Michelle Obama.
Right, that's what I heard.
And so there is possible stuff going on the federal level as far as that's concerned. But he's putting out the narrative that he didn't do anything wrong and he's innocent, and the fact that they didn't pursue anything meant that he was innocent. Yeah. And the Chicago Police Department is enraged and basically said, look, the narrative you're putting out is not true, and you cost us $130,000, I believe. It's 120 or 130. And you've got enough money to pay for that, and we want you to pay for what you cost us chasing up your false accusations. And he's going like, no, I ain't doing that. And so now they're proceeding to take it to court.
Well,
and they're suing him.
Well, talk about the waters being muddy, though. And
I posted a timeline of events from the Chicago Tribune.
Because we're talking about, the need for, the justice system rather than, the public jury or whatever. Doesn't that muddy the waters if this is true?
Well, it's again the overarching issue which is happening culturally. See, these are little snippets of things that are happening within these various subcultures that exist within our overall culture. The overall cultural issue here is it's becoming very clear that our justice system is having issues because it appears that there's a double standard for how it is that people with influence and wealth and how they're treated in instances, and then how the common person would be treated. And that's the overarching issue that's there. And the difficulty is that the institutions which were supposed to be the guardian and protector of that, which is the Department of Justice and the FBI, those two institutions have been tainted irreparably, apparently, as well. And so you have this double standard that is set all throughout the culture. You've got a double standard between President Trump and Hillary Clinton. You've got a double standard between, Smollett and
the layperson, maybe?
Yes, and, you've got a double standard with these people that are violating all kinds of federal laws at the very top, and the normal workers, would never get away with that. When I was still working for the IRS, when President Obama's administration tried to use the Internal Revenue to attack conservative groups, and the woman who was responsible for that, who was heading up the department of making the decisions for who would receive tax-exempt status versus who wouldn't, she got off scot-free, retired, and when confronted by it, took the fifth. As an employee of the Internal Revenue, I was constantly under scrutiny to make sure that I handled money correctly, didn't influence people incorrectly, and I could have been brought up on charges and lost my job. In fact, I was at one time accused of doing something that I didn't do, and went through that whole process of being brought up under suspicion and going through a process to get my name cleared. And yet we see these higher ups that just go off and they're not even touched.
But wouldn't you say that so for all the Jussie Smollett's, there's also the President Trumps and the Michael Jacksons, the really affluent people. Like, I don't know that it is like the Eloy and the Morlocks here, where it's like the upper and the lower. You're welcome. The upper and the lower class of society. I don't know that classism really exists anymore. In that vein. Certainly there's poverty and
I'm not talking about necessarily a class. I'm talking about people that are in positions of power and influence, though, get away with a whole lot more than
I feel like they always have.
To a degree, yes, but supposedly
That's exactly why they're called having power.
But supposedly in our society, that's not supposed to exist.
Yeah, I personally don't think that the issue is people who are influencers versus people who are not. I think the issue is that you have these minority agendas that are vocal. It's people who
Yep.
who are able to use technology and who are able to use the stream of subjective reality in order to get whatever target they want to. So you could be the most influential person on the planet, arguably, like President Trump. And if you are a vocal minority who knows how to use technology, then you can rally the masses against that person. The issue with Jussie Smollett, in my opinion, has more to do with the fact of intersectionality, that his intersectionality, the fact that he is black and homosexual, allows him a vocal minority that other people don't have. And it's the popular vocal minority. And his channel, the fact that he is a TV star, and not his channel like Fox, but the fact that he is a TV star gives him a large audience, and so people want what they want.
Yeah, but I would push back on that to say that, when you look at Justice, you see her standing there with the scales and she's blind.
Sure.
The idea being that justice is blind.
Right.
So if you violate the law, regardless of whether it's federal, state, county, whatever, when you violate the law, regardless of your position or station in life, regardless of how much money you have, what your color is, what your orientation is, it doesn't matter. When you violate the law, you are to be investigated and prosecuted based upon your violation of the law. And what we see happening clearly is that there are people in positions of influence who are not being prosecuted and are clearly violating the law.
But there are people who are in positions of influence who are being prosecuted, and even when there's no evidence to stack up against them.
Not as many as should be.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that isn't the issue.
To me, that is the issue.
The issue isn't that justice is blind. The issue is that justice is greedy. Mm. That's the thing. A blind person can hold those scales and know which side is tipping. And that's the issue, is that justice is greedy now, because justice is subjective and not objective. So she doesn't judge by the standard of what is objective. She judges by the standard of what's going to make her the most money, even if she's blind. So it may not be that she sees somebody and is like, oh, that's ugly, or I didn't see this crime, but whatever side is giving her money, that's the side she's going to go towards.
Certainly there's an element there.
And I think that's where we're at.
And that's the difficulty that's there currently. Again, massive social upheaval.
It's the subjective nature of things.
Yeah.
So how's the common person supposed to deal with that? You have the Michael Jackson thing, you have the Jussie Smollett thing, and it seemingly muddying the waters of the justice system, because on one hand we're saying you need to trust the justice system. Look at what's been done for several-year trial, investigation, etc., etc. Now there's a new accusation based on nothing, doesn't want to be held to the same scrutiny. But then you have the Jussie Smollett thing, and it's the impression is that someone was influenced, and now, a narrative, and then he's presenting a narrative. So how's the common person supposed to deal with that?
So I think the logical position is to mistrust what institution that you put your trust in. I think that that's how the common person should deal with it.
Yeah.
I'd like to say that that's not the case. I, as a Christian, believe that we should view we should view the hand of God in the hand of the government. I know that's a scary thing to say, but that's what the Scripture presents.
That's what Scripture does say.
So, insofar as it is meant to carry out justice in society, that's what it's meant to, that's what governments are meant to do according to Scripture. So this is not to say that governments can't be corrupt. They certainly can. So I think that what you're looking for is that people should not be accepting of it. And in this case, because we live in America, I think that people should vote with their conscience if they're not accepting of it. But more important than that, on the mass level, I think what it comes down to is accepting that the reason why you're so bothered with the culture is because we cannot live in a meaningful way and have an arbitrary standard. And we are more and more, like, you may be a person who doesn't care about these things, but they are affecting you more and more. And what is going to happen is that there will not be a safe place to hide, because when things are arbitrary, everything is extreme.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. And there will not be a safe place for you to hide in your lukewarmness of things. And it's going to polarize, and you have to choose. And so what I would just say is, you should choose God. Like, that's really what it comes down to, because God provides us a standard. Like, as Christians, God provides us a standard where we don't have to be ashamed of the philosophy that we have. We have a non-arbitrary, universal understanding of justice and equality and identity and all of these things that now are in question. In our society, we don't understand identity. We don't understand, the concept of gender or sexuality or psychology or any of these things. We don't understand these things. We don't understand what makes us who we are, where we came from, so on and so forth. But the Scripture actually provides us those things so that we don't have to waste our time arguing about understanding them. And so if you can't have an external ethic, then you should have an internal ethic. And that internal ethic then will give you the peace that you desire, and then can make its way into the outside world. And that might be something that you may not understand, but let me just tell you from history, Christianity is a persecuted philosophy. It was persecuted when it was born into reality in the first century, and it is still persecuted all over the world. And there's a reason why Christianity thrived when it was under persecution in Rome. We may not be under persecution right now, like in America, although that's arguable. Yeah. But like, we may not be being burned on crosses in order to light the streets like what Nero did.
Or like it is in China.
Right. Well, they're not burned on crosses to light the streets, but they're persecuted. Yeah. But that being said, even if we were, Christianity would still thrive if you look at the history records. And those people that died, they died in peace. And that's the thing. So you can't hide, like, as we go on further and further, you can't hide in your secret personal objections anymore, because everything you do is under scrutiny and it's an arbitrary standard. So I say, swing. That's what I say. Swing away.
Wow. And I don't disagree with that. Yes, Scripture comes, you're exactly correct, Josh. Scripture comes to the position that, first of all, to understand that as believers, as disciples of Christ, we should be living a particular way in order to bring honor to God. Normally, unless you have an overt issue coming up, the types of things that, say, Jay Sekulo's organization comes up where people are violating your rights, normally you can live in such a fashion, and you should live in such a fashion, that you're not going around breaking laws. Okay, so that's right. That's the normal. But there is enough stuff out there going on that you need to educate yourself of what the law says and how it should be applied, so that you don't run into issues when things come up. For example, when somebody comes to your door and demands to come into your home, the police officer will say, "Can I come into your house?" your response should be, sure, let me open the door and let you in. No, at least in America, your response should be not without a search warrant. Meaning that they had to go to court in order to justify why they're going to violate your rights.
But I agree with you. It's important to know your rights.
You need to know your rights and how to exercise them correctly.
But when we have even the President of the United States who is being put under scrutiny, or a man who is dead, was proven innocent, and is being posthumously, without evidence, being tried in the court of public opinion.
Yeah, well, that's a separate issue, and that's a difficult thing. And we saw this just this week.
Even knowing your rights is arbitrary.
Yes, but you do need to know enough to protect yourself. For example,
can't wait till those constitutional rights are changed.
Well, we
need to wrap up. So
there are people who are working to change those constitutional rights, and there's always the push. This week, Congress, which is now led by the Democrats because they couldn't get their way and prove there was any type of collusion, they now have decided that they're going to go after President Trump's past 10 years of tax returns. And they have subpoenaed the Internal Revenue Service to turn over his tax returns.
But this is my point.
They cannot do that. And so what will happen is he will resist. It will go to court, and the courts will decide whether or not they meet the criteria or not, or is it a fishing expedition?
Right, but this is my point, is that these standards, even if you know your American rights, these standards are arbitrary. They shift depending on the position of man. The interpretation changes. That's why it's meant to change. That's why we have our Supreme Court, so it can interpret a static document, and things can be added to it based on, voting and so on and so forth. These things are arbitrary.
I don't disagree. I'm just saying.
And so you
need to know your rights.
You need to know your rights, but even then they won't protect you. Our hope is found in Christ. And that's what we want our listeners to understand.
Yeah, well, okay, I'm just saying, when you're pulled over and the police officer wants to search your car, the response is not without a search warrant. If you're carrying a weapon in the state of Oregon, Oregon is an open carry state, and if you're carrying a weapon in public and people call in and say, I'm afraid because this person's walking down the street carrying a weapon, and you're stopped by the police, your response to the police is, this is an open carry state and I'm doing nothing illegal and you have no right to stop me. You have to know what the laws are in order to protect yourself.
But what I'm saying is the laws won't protect you.
CYA, cover your own...
Wow.
The laws will not protect you as things become more and more arbitrary and
I don't
subjective.
disagree. I'm just saying that right now we have a responsibility.
Go to the South. Go to the South where they are constantly challenging that the laws protect them, even though the laws are in place, because things are subjective. This is my point. Our responsibility is not to know the laws first. Our responsibility is not to find philosophical safety in the laws or emotional safety in the laws. Those things are arbitrary, and they become less and less a reality that is going to keep us safe. Our responsibility...
We're going to wrap after this.
Our responsibility and the message that we should be giving people first and foremost and most deeply is that they need to find their safety in the gospel of Christ. It is the problem with that. It is the one thing that they should not be ashamed of, that can hold them safe as all of this shifting sand comes on, whether we transition to a 1984 situation like Big Brother where it's more insipid, or whether we transition to an imperial first century Rome situation where we become straight up slaves to the government.
I stated on the outset, as a believer, you should not be living in a fashion where it will draw conflict.
We can't help but draw conflict.
Maybe so, but
as we follow Christ, we become hated by the world.
Live at peace as much as possible.
As much as you can. But As we become Christians, we become hated by the world. And this is the point. This is the point we need to understand. All of these things are leading up to the point where, as people, even if you're not a Christian, maybe you're just, a morality, like a moral person, you can no longer just sit in your morals by yourself. You have to make a polarized proclamation. It's coming to that point.
I agree.
I'll plug your podcast in just a second for more on this. So yeah, we're gonna wrap. That's a good note to end on. So if you're interested in things we're talking about, you can check out. I think Josh was posting links and such on the comments section, keeping you updated. If you have something you're interested in, we have our Facebook page at Culture and Sanity. And then to the point Josh is making, to help with that, if you're interested in exploring your faith or are completely new to Christ, to the Bible, you can check out our website, abfpdx.org. There's a help tab you can go to. That is Pastor Monty's phone. A couple things that just happened, or a couple things the couple things in the pipeline. We just had our latest cross-examination panel, which was alluded to several times in today's episode, on church racism or intersectionality. So check that out. That's on the Facebook page for cross-examination. Just search cross-examination. You can find that there. You can look forward to the next podcast episode for younger Christian people called The Upper Story, which I believe is on relationships.
Yeah, it's like young Christians talking with pastors or youth pastors, just casually on the yellow couch. The yellow couch.
Yellow couch talk.
About what relationships mean to them, and the difficulties of navigating that in Christian culture.
Yeah, and that's the last Sunday. Is that the last Sunday?
Yeah, the last Sunday of this month.
This month, correct. You can look forward to Pastor Monty's podcast Tuesdays at 11, Truth Time with Pastor Monty, where he talks more on the kinds of things we were talking about just now. Check out Alethia's, verse casts every morning, Monday through Friday. What's the next Cross-X? I think it's on denominations.
Yeah, denominations.
So that'll be not this month in April, but in May.
Last Sunday.
Last Sunday at May at 7 a.m. So all these things you can find on the corresponding Facebook page. Look for the Abandoned Initiative, for the Upper Story podcast. Look for Pastor Monty's... Does he have a Facebook page?
Yeah,
he does have Truth Time. And then obviously you can find ours at Culture and Sanity. Lots going on with us. So thank you for being here, and we look forward to next time. Thanks.
The views presented in this program are not meant to express the specific views of the Aletheia Bible Fellowship. You are listening to the Vigilance Radio Network.